My name is Lisa. I'm 52 years old, and for the last 20 years, people have called me the mother of that missing boy from Florida.
But that's not why I'm telling you this.
I'm telling you this because the man America has spent 2 decades worshiping as a hero father, a man who goes on TV and cries for lost children, who built a whole nonprofit around helping families like ours, is not who you think he is. He's my husband, Mark. And he turned our missing son into a business. We lived in a little town on the Gulf Coast of Florida, the kind of place snowbirds retire to and families visit for summer vacations. Back then, our lives were painfully average. We had a beige one-story house, a minivan with goldfish crackers crushed into the carpet, and a backyard with a plastic kiddie pool that always had one dead bug floating in it. Our son Ethan was 7. He had this wild brown hair that never stayed brushed, a constellation of freckles on his nose, and front teeth a little too big for his face. He slept with a stuffed dinosaur named Rex and snored like a tiny old man. 2 weeks before that day, Ethan had asked me, "Mom, if you could have any superpower, what would it be?"
I told him I'd want to fly.
He rolled his eyes dramatically. "You're scared of planes." "Fine," I said. "Then I'd want to read minds." He squinted at me, thinking in that serious way he had. "That sounds like it would hurt your feelings." Looking back, I think that was the last moment I heard the real Ethan. Every memory after that feels like a photograph that's been handled too many times. Edges worn, colors fading. On June 14, we were supposed to go to the beach. It was Ethan's first official day of summer vacation. The sky was bright blue, the kind they put on Florida postcards. I packed his favorite PB&J sandwiches, apple slices dusted with cinnamon sugar, and a bag of Cheetos he'd begged for at the grocery store. Mark, my husband, loaded the cooler into the minivan. He was 34 back then, tall and tan, with that easy, charming smile everyone loved. He sold boats for a living and knew how to make anyone trust him in 10 minutes. People used to say, "If Mark says it, it must be true." I used to believe that. "Come on, bud," Mark called from the driveway. "Waves aren't gonna wait for you." Ethan came barreling down the hall in his red swim trunks with little sharks on them, flip-flops slapping the tile. He smelled like sunscreen and bubblegum toothpaste. He threw his arms around my waist. "Race you to the car, Mom," he yelled, already halfway out the door. I didn't know that would be the last time I'd see him run. We got to Sunset Beach a little after 10. The parking lot was already filling up with tourists, dragging coolers and toddlers. The air tasted like salt and sunscreen and French fries from the snack stand. Mark carried the umbrella and the cooler. I carried the towels and Ethan's little blue boogie board. Ethan carried nothing but his excitement. He ran ahead of us, barefoot, leaving shallow prints in the hot sand. "Not so far," I called. "Stay where I can see you." "Okay," he yelled back, but he always pushed that okay as far as he could get away with. We set up our spot near the lifeguard tower, a little distance from the crowds. I spread the towels, shook the sand from the umbrella, watched Ethan dig his heel into the sand like a dog making a bed. Mark kissed my cheek. "You relax," he said. "I'll take him in the water." He grabbed Ethan's hand, and they ran toward the waves, Mark looking back once just to flash me that smile. If you asked me, for years, when exactly things went wrong, I'd always say around 11 a.m. It was the moment time split into before and after, and every stupid little choice I made that morning started replaying in my head like some cruel movie. I stayed on the towel the first 15 minutes, watching them splash in the shallow water. Ethan screamed every time a wave hit him, the way kids scream when they're thrilled and terrified at the same time. Then my phone buzzed. It was my sister, calling from Michigan. "You guys at the beach?" she asked. Yeah, first day of chaos, I joked. We talked. 5 minutes, maybe 10. I don't even know anymore. I remember shading my eyes with my hand, squinting toward the water, still seeing Mark and Ethan's heads popping up between the waves.
Everything looked normal.
When I hung up, I realized I couldn't immediately spot Ethan. I saw Mark, up to his waist in water, looking toward the horizon. I sat up. My stomach did this tiny, ridiculous flip, like a hiccup. "Mark!" I called, waving. He turned, waved back.
"Where's Ethan?" I shouted.
He cupped his hand around his mouth. "What?" "Ethan!" I yelled louder, already on my feet. "Where is he?" His smile faded. He looked around, scanning the water. "Mark?" My voice came out sharper, higher. "Where is he?" I don't know," he yelled back. "He was just right here." I tell myself I started running, but it felt like my legs had sunk into the sand. If you've never lost sight of your child in public, I hope you never understand that particular flavor of terror. First, you think, okay, he's just behind that group. Then, he probably went back to the towel. Then, he's hiding. This is a game. Then, the waves. Then, he's gone. The lifeguard blew his whistle. People started looking around. Someone shouted that a child was missing. The beach turned into a nightmare version of a Where's Waldo page. My eyes scanning too many bodies, too many colors, too many strangers. Everyone in the Hamptons knew Evelyn Marie Whitmore as the sweet, slightly dotty widow who still drove a rust-flecked 2008 Buick Century, clipped coupons for Stop and Shop, and lived in the tiniest cottage on the very edge of Gin Lane. The cottage was a weathered gray shingle box with peeling white trim, a cracked asphalt driveway, and one of those old-fashioned rope and pulley clotheslines in the side yard. Real estate agents called it a teardown. Influencers called it an eyesore. Evelyn's daughter-in-law, Brittany Whitmore, née Brittany Lynn Carter of Greenwich, Connecticut, 310K Instagram followers, 28 years old, and absolutely certain she was about to become the next Martha Stewart, called it depressing every chance she got. Brittany had been married to Evelyn's only child, Trip, for exactly 18 months, and in that time, she had turned getting grandma to downsize into a full-time hobby. Every holiday dinner, every birthday brunch, every sunset toast on somebody's yacht, Brittany's crystal-clear voice would ring out. "Trip, babe, we really need to get your mom into something safer. That cottage is basically falling into the ocean. It's not healthy for her to be rattling around alone in that museum of 1980s sadness." Trip, Harvard 14, Goldman 15 to 18, currently between things and living off a trust fund that was running lower than he admitted, would nod like a dashboard bobblehead and mutter, "You're right, babe, we'll talk to her." They never actually talked to Evelyn. They talked at her. And Evelyn, 70 years old, 5'2" in her orthopedic sandals, silver hair in a sensible bob, always smiled that soft, vague smile and changed the subject to hydrangeas or the church rummage sale. What nobody in the Hamptons knew, nobody except Evelyn's lawyer, her accountant, and one extremely discreet private wealth team at JP Morgan in Manhattan, was that the tear-down cottage sat on a parcel that had never been subdivided from the original 42-acre oceanfront estate Evelyn's husband, Harrison Whitmore, had quietly bought in 1979 for $1.8 million cash the week after he sold his semiconductor patents to Intel. The main mansion had been sold off decades ago, but the original deeds had never been split. The crumbling little cottage, the overgrown dune, the private beach nobody used anymore, all of it still belonged to one person. Evelyn Marie Whitmore was worth, on paper, $187 million, and she had decided 35 years earlier that the very best way to protect herself from gold diggers was to look like the easiest mark on the East Coast. It had worked beautifully until Brittany decided she wanted a vow renewal ceremony for the content. Brittany announced the event 6 months in advance on Instagram. Renewing our forever with my soulmate on the most magical beach in the Hamptons. #Whitmore vows again. #10 years from now, living my best life. The beach she tagged was, of course, Evelyn's beach. She never asked permission. She simply told Evelyn that the family was borrowing the old beach lot because it would mean so much to have the ceremony where Tripp used to play as a child. Evelyn had murmured, "Of course, dear," and gone back to deadheading her roses. The day of the vow renewal dawned perfect. 78 degrees, cloudless, Atlantic sparkling like a Tiffany's window. 300 of Brittany's closest friends, most of whom she'd met through brand deals, flew in on private jets or rolled up in G-Wagons. The setup cost $420,000, white orchids flown in from Thailand, a floral arch that looked like it had been stolen from heaven, a string quartet, a raw bar the size of a Buick, and a drone swarm programmed to spell B and T forever in the sky at sunset. Brittany wore a custom Vera Wang that left very little to the imagination. Tripp wore linen and the slightly panicked smile of a man whose Amex was already smoking. Evelyn arrived at 4:15 p.m. in her ancient Buick, wearing a lavender linen dress she'd bought at TJ Maxx in 2019 and a straw hat from the church bazaar. A junior influencer live-streaming arrivals wrinkled her nose and whispered to her 1.2 million followers, "Okay, who let Tripp's grandma out of the nursing home? This is giving depression core." Evelyn waved cheerfully and took her seat in the very last row. The ceremony was peak Brittany. Handwritten vows that mentioned building our empire together, a surprise performance by a singer who'd once opened for Taylor Swift, and the release of 200 white doves that immediately pooped on half the guests. Then came the part Brittany had scripted for maximum virality. She grabbed the mic from the officiant, tears sparkling theatrically. "Before we party, I need to say something from my heart. Tripp's grandma Evelyn has been like a mother to me, but lately we've been so worried about her living alone in that, well, let's be honest, that falling down little cottage. It breaks my heart seeing her struggle. So Tripp and I have found the most gorgeous assisted living community in Palm Beach. Ocean views, 5-star chef, the works, and we're gifting it to her today." The crowd cooed. Phones shot up. Brittany produced an oversized card the size of a surfboard that read, "Welcome home, Grandma," in gold foil. Tripp, sweating through his linen, added weakly, "We just want you safe, Mom." Evelyn stood slowly. The lavender dress fluttered in the breeze. She reached into her straw purse and pulled out the 2007 Motorola Razr flip phone that Brittany had once mocked as literally a prop from a museum. She pressed one button. Speed dial 1. "Proceed," she said quietly, and closed the phone. For about 10 seconds, nothing happened. Then, every single LED screen on the beach, there were 8, rented for the drone show later, flickered from Brittany's carefully curated mood board to a stark white slide with black 72-point type. Property title, Suffolk County, NY. Parcel 0909870001 004001. Owner of record, Evelyn Marie Whitmore. 42.3 acres, oceanfront, current appraised value $187 million. Gasps rippled outward like a stone dropped in still water.
The next slide appeared.
This venue is located on private property owned by Evelyn M. Whitmore. Permission to occupy revoked, effective 5 p.m. today. Brittany's jaw actually dropped, which was impressive given the Botox. A low, amused murmur spread through the crowd. Someone in the back started slow clapping. A black SUV rolled down the dune path that everyone had assumed was public. Out stepped Charles Park, Evelyn's attorney of 40 years, wearing a navy suit sharp enough to cut glass. Behind him walked 2 uniformed Southampton Village police officers and a woman in a blazer holding an iPad. Charles took the mic from Brittany's frozen hand. "Good evening," he said pleasantly. "Mrs. Evelyn Whitmore has asked me to inform you that this gathering is now trespassing on private property. You have 15 minutes to vacate before the Southampton police begin issuing citations. The caterers, florists, and production company have already been notified that final payment has been canceled." He nodded toward the raw bar. "Please feel free to take a lobster roll for the road." The quartet stopped mid-note. The influencer who had mocked Evelyn's car was now filming with shaking hands, whispering, "Oh my God, chat, we're witnessing the greatest plot twist of all time." Brittany found her voice. It came out as a shriek. "This is insane! Tripp, do something!" Tripp looked like he was calculating how fast he could swim to Portugal. Evelyn finally walked down the white carpet aisle everyone had assumed was for the bride. She stopped in front of Brittany and spoke softly enough that only the front 3 rows heard, but every phone mic picked it up crystal clear. "You wanted my beach for your content, darling. You have 12 minutes left to enjoy it." Then she turned to the crowd, raised her voice just enough, and smiled the same sweet smile she'd used for decades. "Thank you all for coming. Safe travels home." She walked back up the dune, got into her dented Buick, and drove away while 300 people scrambled like the Titanic was sinking behind them. By 5:07 p.m., the only things left on the beach were orchids wilting in the heat, abandoned Manolos stuck in the sand, and Brittany sobbing uncontrollably while her wedding planner tried to explain to the drone operator that yes, the check really had bounced. The live stream hit 4.7 million concurrent viewers before Instagram crashed it. Twitter immediately crowned Evelyn Queen of the Hamptons. The clip of Brittany screaming, "This is elder abuse," while security escorted her off her own vow renewal became the top trending video in America for 48 straight hours. 3 days later, Evelyn sat on the porch of her tear-down cottage sipping iced tea while a Sotheby's International Realty team measured every grain of sand on her 42 acres. The Buick was gone, replaced by a sky blue 1964 Porsche 356 Cabriolet that had been in storage since 1988. She still wore the lavender TJ Maxx dress. Some habits die harder than family. Tripp showed up the following weekend, alone, looking like he hadn't slept since the Jurassic period. He stood at the screen door, clutching a bouquet of bodega roses. "Mom," he croaked, "can we talk?" Evelyn looked at him for a long moment. "Of course, sweetheart," she said, voice gentle as ever. "But first, the new gate code is your birth date backward. If you can remember that, we'll have plenty to discuss." He stared at her, eyes filling. She closed the door softly and went back to her hydrangeas. Some plot twists, once revealed, can never be unwritten. And in the Hamptons, the only thing more valuable than oceanfront property is the satisfaction of watching 300 influencers learn that lesson the hard way. The Queen of Gin Lane had left the building, but she still owned the beach. "Ethan!" I screamed. my voice cracking. "Ethan!" Mark grabbed my shoulders. "I'll go toward the pier," he said, already running. "You check the bathroom. He might have gone up to the snack shack." We searched everywhere. The water, the shore, the bathrooms, the parking lot, the snack stand, the little boardwalk where they sell cheap jewelry and t-shirts that say, "I got sunburned in Florida." Someone called 911. Someone else hugged me. Someone asked what he was wearing. Red shark trunks, blue boogie board, brown hair, 7 years old. I answered the same questions over and over, as if repetition would make him appear. He didn't. By 1 p.m., there were police cars in the lot and a helicopter circling overhead. They closed off sections of the beach, asked families to clear the water. "Did you see anyone talking to him?" one officer asked me. I don't know. There were so many people. He was just with my husband. I looked away for 5 minutes. Mark was pacing nearby, wet from the chest down, arms wrapped around himself like he was cold. His eyes were red. His voice shook every time he said Ethan's name. "I turned for 1 second," he kept saying. "I swear, 1 second." I believed him. Because what else can a mother do in that moment except cling to whatever version of reality doesn't kill her? The official story became, Ethan disappeared at the beach, possibly drowned, possibly taken, no body found, no witnesses with a clear memory, just a sunny day and a missing boy. The media loved it. The first local news van showed up before sunset. By the next day, national outlets were calling. They wanted photos, videos, anything. Mark spent that first night pacing our living room, hands in his hair, eyes swollen from crying. I sat on the sofa, clutching Rex, Ethan's stuffed dinosaur, to my chest. "We should talk to them," Mark said finally. "The police?" I asked. "The news." He looked at me like it was obvious. If we get his face out everywhere, somebody might have seen him. Somebody might have grabbed the wrong kid, you know? His voice cracked. There could be a chance. He was right, of course. So the next morning, with no sleep and eyes so puffy I could barely open them, I stood under hot studio lights at the local TV station while a woman with perfect hair handed me a tissue. Mark took my hand. "We're going to bring him home," he told the camera. Millions of people saw that clip over the next week, and they fell in love with him. The grieving father. In the beginning, the nonprofit felt like a good thing. After 3 months with no sign of Ethan, no credible tips, no ransom demands, no body, nothing but an empty bedroom and a closet full of Lego sets, I started to go numb. I stopped eating, stopped sleeping, stopped doing anything but walking into Ethan's room and sitting on his bed. "Lisa," Mark said one night, crouching in front of me. His hands were on my knees, his eyes full of something that looked like compassion and exhaustion. "We can't live like this." "How else are we supposed to live?" I whispered. He took a long breath. What if we turned this into something? My brain was too foggy to understand. Turn what into something? What happened to Ethan? His voice went soft. Other kids go missing every day. Other parents are going through what we're going through. What if we start, I don't know, a foundation, a nonprofit? We could help other families. Set up search teams, billboards, whatever. We could give this pain a purpose. I stared at him. "You want to build a charity out of our son's disappearance?" He flinched at the word. "No, I mean, yes, but not like that. Not to make money or anything. Just to help. Otherwise, this is just meaningless." I can't describe how badly I wanted that. For Ethan's suffering, for our suffering, to mean something, to not be just another sad statistic. So we did it. We called it Ethan's Light Foundation. The logo was a little drawing Ethan had done of a stick figure with a flashlight. I found it in one of his school notebooks, next to a list of things he loved: pizza, dinosaurs, mom, dad. We set up a website, a GoFundMe, a Facebook page. People donated. People shared their own stories. People sent letters and cards and little angel statues. People told us Ethan was in heaven. People told us God had a plan. Within a year, Ethan's Light was getting more attention than I ever imagined. There were news interviews, true crime podcasts, daytime talk shows. They always wanted to speak to both of us, but Mark quickly became the star. He was so good at it. The way he sat forward, elbows on knees, hands clasped like he was holding himself together by sheer force. The way his voice broke at the right moments. The way he said, "No parent should ever go through this alone," and people believed him. He'd cry on camera. Not big, ugly sobs, just the perfect tear that slid down his cheek as he looked at Ethan's photograph. "That's our boy," he would say softly, tapping the frame. "We won't stop looking until we bring him home." The donations poured in. We got checks from strangers in Iowa, California, even Canada. Big corporations donated too, bank CEOs and tech companies that wanted to look compassionate. "Every penny goes toward helping families," Mark would say. And for a while, that was mostly true. We funded searches for missing kids, paid for billboards, flyers, private investigators. We organized support groups for parents in our area. I met dozens of mothers like me, with tight smiles and eyes full of permanent grief. But slowly, too slowly for me to notice at first, the foundation became less about helping others and more about Mark. Looking back, there were signs. He started dressing differently for interviews. At first, he'd thrown on whatever polo shirt was clean. Later, it was expensive button-downs and carefully distressed jeans. I remember opening a credit card bill and seeing a $1,200 charge at a high-end menswear store. "We needed a professional image," he said when I asked. "Donors expect us to look a certain way." Then there was the office. We rented a little strip mall space for Ethan's Light. One room, a desk, a couple of chairs, a wall plastered with missing kid flyers. That made sense to me. A place to keep files, meet families, organize searches. But within 3 years, the office had become a full 2-story building downtown. Open concept, glass walls, a lacquered wood conference table, a big neon sign that said Ethan's Light in cursive. "We got a corporate sponsor who wanted a naming opportunity," Mark explained. "This'll help us raise even more money." He started hiring staff, fundraising coordinators, social media managers, a PR team. At every staff meeting, I noticed something weird. People treated Mark like a CEO, not a grieving dad. "Mark, that photo of you with the candles did numbers on Instagram." "Mark, Good Morning America wants you back next week." "Mark, your speech at the conference got us 3 new donors over 100,000 each." His natural charisma, the thing that had made him a great salesman, translated perfectly into the nonprofit world. He wasn't just Ethan's dad anymore. He was the face of grief. The first time I noticed money going missing was 6 years after Ethan disappeared. I was sitting at my desk in the foundation office, trying to reconcile some expense reports. We had helped fund a search in Georgia and another one in Texas. We'd paid for printing, travel, private investigators. But some of the numbers weren't adding up. There were wire transfers labeled consulting that I didn't recognize. $4,000 here, $8,000 there, a $15,000 transfer to an account number I'd never seen. "Hey, Mark?" I asked, poking my head into his glass-walled office. He was leaning back in his leather chair, phone pressed between his shoulder and ear. He glanced at me, held up a finger. I waited. Absolutely, he was saying. Your name will be on the sponsorship banner. We're honored to have you on board. Anything in the 10 to 20,000 range makes a huge difference. Right. God bless you. He hung up and finally looked at me, flashing that practiced, weary smile. What's up, Liz? I stepped in and closed the door behind me. Can we talk about the expense reports? Sure. He took off his glasses, rubbed the bridge of his nose. This about Georgia? I know that PI was pricey, but... No, not that. I sat down across from him. There are transfers here I don't recognize. Consulting? $15,000 last month? $8,000 the month before? His eyes flicked to the papers in my hand. Yeah, that's accounting stuff. What kind of accounting stuff? We had to hire some outside help, he said. You remember when the IRS was all over us last year? We almost lost our 501c3 status. These guys helped clean up the mess. I frowned. Why didn't we talk about it together? I'm on the board too. He shrugged, that easy shrug that used to charm me, and now felt like static under my skin. It was last minute, Liz. You were in a bad place with the anniversary coming up. I didn't want to stress you more. Part of me wanted to push. Part of me was so tired. Tired of fighting, tired of grief, tired of paperwork and interviews and missing kid flyers. Okay, I said slowly. I just want us to be transparent. For the families, for Ethan. His face softened at the mention of Ethan. Or maybe he just knew that's where my defenses were weakest. Of course, he said. Everything I do is for him, for them. He stood, walked around the desk, and hugged me. His shirt smelled like expensive cologne and printer toner. It's us against the world, right? He murmured, like always. I nodded into his chest, and that was that. I didn't know it then, but that was the moment I chose not to read his mind. I chose not to use the superpower my 7-year-old had told me would hurt my feelings. I wish I had let it hurt. The real cracks didn't appear until years later, when the cameras started calling a little less often. After about 15 years, the media moved on. There were newer tragedies, fresher cases, more shocking disappearances. We were old news. Our missing boy was now a missing man on paper, frozen at 7 in our photos. Donations slowed. Some of our big corporate sponsors quietly faded away. We had to let a few staff go. I suggested we scale back, focus only on local cases, maybe merge with another organization. Mark shut that down immediately. We are not failing, he said, pacing the living room. We're not some little charity that disappears. We've helped hundreds of families. I know, I said, but we're spending more than we're bringing in. Maybe we should... We just need a new angle, he interrupted. A fresh campaign, a documentary, something. I watched him, really watched him, for the first time in years. The lines in his face were deeper, but his eyes still had that restless glint. His hair was touched with gray at the temples, the kind that looks good on TV dads. He was in his 50s now, but he still cared about his image, still hit the gym, still bought designer shirts when we could barely afford to pay our office rent. Mark, I said slowly, what if we let it go? He froze. Let what go? The foundation, the speaking tours, the interviews. My throat tightened. We could close it down, grieve in private for once. He stared at me like I'd spoken another language. And do what, Lisa? He asked. Go back to selling boats? You were good at it, I said softly. That was before, he snapped, before all of this. He gestured around like all of this was our life's work and not a monument built on the corpse of our missing child. This is who we are now, he said. People need us. People need me. There it was, that little shift. Not us, him. I went to bed that night with a pit in my stomach. A month later, I found the hard drive. It was late on a Saturday, and Mark was out of town for a fundraiser in Chicago. I was home alone with the dog and a glass of wine I wasn't really drinking. I'd been trying to find our original home videos of Ethan, realized I hadn't watched them in years. Most of our digital files were stored in Mark's office at home, inside the ugly metal filing cabinet he'd bought at Staples 15 years ago. I pulled out the bottom drawer and started rummaging. Old tax returns, board meeting minutes, printouts of donor lists. At the very back was a small black external hard drive with a piece of blue painter's tape on it. Somebody had written donors on the tape in Mark's sloppy block letters. I assumed it was just an archive of old giving records, but I plugged it into my laptop anyway. At first, that's exactly what it looked like. Folders labeled by year: 2010, 2011, 2012. Inside each, spreadsheets, PDFs of donation receipts, scanned checks. Then I saw a folder called Special. My heart sped up for no reason I could name. I clicked. Inside were subfolders, each named with a person's last name: Carlson, Mendoza, Lang, Jacobs. Names I recognized, people who'd written big checks over the years, people who'd hugged us at charity galas and told us they prayed for Ethan every night. I opened Carlson. The first file was a Word document titled Follow-Up Script. I clicked it and started reading.